Thank you, David. Thank you, Mark. That's a fantastic way, I think, to remind us to be charitable and not long-winded. I'm here to make sure we do finish on time, so it might be 5 minutes anyway, but I'm pretty confident we'll be finishing at 9:30. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and welcome to the 2026 Merton Council hustings. And it's fantastic that Wimblecomm has brought all of the candidates and party representatives here together, and that you've also participated already, first of all by turning up, but also by sending in a whole range of really great questions. We're going to cover a lot of ground tonight, so hopefully there will be lots of information that will help to inform you and inform your thinking ahead of the vote. We have 5 representatives of the parties here tonight. We have, from the Liberal Democrats, Anthony Fairclough at the end there, who will be standing in the Wimbledon Town Ward. Next to me is Ross Garrett, who's the current leader of Merton Council for the Labour Party and is Longthornton Ward. Great. And then on the other side of me is Ed Gretton, who is from Reform UK, and he is not standing as a councillor, but is running the Reform campaign in Merton. And on the other side of Ed is Dan Holden, who's standing in Hillside, who's existing councillor for the Conservatives. And then at the far end is Pippa Maslin from the Green Party, who will be standing in St Helier. So all of the main parties who are putting candidates across a number of wards across Merton are represented here tonight, so I think we're going to get a really good view about the parties. So just to say again, thank you for your questions. There are too many really to ask. So what we've done with the committee is look at the major themes that have emerged, and we've got about 13 areas that we're going to be covering tonight. And every single candidate will get 1 minute to answer. We have got somebody with a kind of timer flag at the end that they can see but you can't, so I'm hoping that will be snappy and precise. And I'm going to be starting with each of the candidates will have 1 minute to introduce themselves and their kind of pitch, I suppose. And I've drawn out the list randomly, so I'll do that in a minute. And then after that, every question, I'll start from an alphabetical approach, but then for each subsequent question, the next person along will answer. So aiming to be as even and as fair as possible, so everybody gets a chance at least twice to kick off the answers. And the questions and the themes that we focused on really are about the areas that, as a councillor and in your local authority, that's what the power is to change. So we have avoided things that are not really within the remit of the local authority. Right, so in terms of kicking off, the order of the 1 minute intros is Ed Gretton, followed by Anthony Fairclough, Ross Garrett, Dan Holden and Pippa Maslin. So I'm going to turn on the second mic. I hope this works. Yeah, I'm going to hand over Ed, and you've got a minute to do your pitch.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. I encourage you all to read the Reform statement on the Friends of Wimbledon Town website, because we set out our vision.
Are these mics working?
We set out our vision for the town centre. What we said is it's definitely worth looking at the concert hall and promoting that. It's a wonderful opportunity. To have Frank Geary, say builder from the concert hall in the middle of the town centre, is a golden ticket opportunity. The council should have been on it at 9 o'clock the next morning. 6 years, 7 years later, absolutely nothing has happened. I don't know why all the political parties just disregard it, but it would be a fabulous opportunity. We also have a plan for Centre Court and Wimbledon Court, as it's now called. We think you're on the wrong track if you think you just tinker around the edges, as the council, many political parties have been doing. What you need to do is something like happening in Maidenhead, which is a wonderful project, the Nicholson project. It turns a shopping mall into a wonderful town centre with plazas and arcade shops and something of really good quality. We think we can deliver these things. We're a wonderful professional team, senior people in finance, banking and the corporate world, and we can deliver this for the residents of Merton and Wimbledon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bang on time. Great start. Right, Anthony, I'm going to pass the mic. I think it's working for you.
Thank you, Louise. That is working. It's good. Well, I'm Anthony Fairclough. I'm the current leader of the opposition on the council for the Liberal Democrats. So, there are only really 2 stories in politics, and that's continuity and change. And tonight we'll all set out our stalls, and whether that's calling for you to play it safe, or to hark back to the past, or indeed to hark back to a past that never really existed. But you can tell a lot from what the parties say about each other. You'll understand their dynamic and the real choice. Now, our plan is to make Merton a place we're proud to call home. We've identified the 6 to fix, the 6 key objectives that we want to focus on. That's to make Merton fairer and more affordable, with cleaner streets and safer neighbourhoods, a thriving local economy, where we work to improve health, and a borough that's a great place to grow up and fit for the future. Now, I'm sure we'll talk in more detail about that, and I can see the yellow flag waving. We've done a lot from opposition, but let's bring competence, care, openness back to Merton Council and make this borough a place people choose to call home, and not just one they happen to live in. Thank you.
Thank you, that's great. Now Rob, for Labour.
Thank you very much. I'm Councillor Ross Garrett, the current leader of Merton Council and the leader of the Labour group. Local elections are important. They're about who sets your council tax, collects your bins, looks after your parks, fixes your roads and cares for the elderly. Labour currently runs Merton Council, and through our good financial management and getting the debt down to one of the lowest in London, we've kept council tax £450 cheaper than Liberal Democrat Kingston. And we've done more of what residents want: pop-up tips 4 times a year, weekly street cleaning, free swimming for over 65s, 100% good or outstanding schools, new safer street patrols, and started building new council homes, 1,000 street trees planted in the last year. We're proud of our record, but we know there is more to do. That's why we're promising to keep bills low, introduce free bulky waste collections, put more safer street officers on patrol, and upground playgrounds and sports facilities. If you want to keep bills low and get more of what you want, stick with Labour on Thursday, the 7th of May.
Thank you. Now, for the Conservatives, we have Dan Holden.
Thank you, David and Louise, for hosting tonight's election hustings. We Conservatives are focusing our campaign to achieve a council that is on your side, not a council that is on your back. Too often, we have seen the council adopt a computer-says-no approach to everything, one that drags its feet on residents' issues. We Conservatives want the council to offer better services and be more responsive to the needs of residents. And too often, we also see the council seeking new, creative ways to extract more money from you. We say no more of that. Conservatives, we want lower taxes, lower fees, and an end to the overzealous parking enforcement, which has been used in Wimbledon for too many years as a cash cow. We would relentlessly focus on local services, cleaning the streets, getting the roads and potholes fixed, emptying the bins and making sure trees are planted across the entire Wimbledon, not just in Richmond and Morden. So on the 7th of May, please vote Conservative.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, and then our final opener is from Pippa Maslin from the Green Party.
Thank you. Support for the Green Party is unquestionably on the up. Greens have more elected representatives and more members than ever before, and across London, Greens stand to take hundreds of seats from Labour next week. Here in Merton, Greens are bringing hope to people who are hungry for change. People like our keen sense of fairness, our determination to tackle environmental and social degradation, our willingness to discuss difficult issues and try to find common ground, our dissemination of information to help people to help themselves, and our conviction that elected representatives should serve residents first and foremost, not their party. So I hope that by the end of this evening, you will see that Merton needs Green councillors. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, that's great. Okay, well, fantastic start to the evening. Everybody was on time, which was a good start. Right, okay, so we're going to kick off with the questions. Anthony, I'm going to come to you first. So this is the area where we had the most questions, so I wanted to start here, and it's about transport. We had about 6 or 7 questions around a range of transport-related issues covering the impact of SUVs on the roads, how to improve public transport, and the importance of the 20-mile-an-hour limit. So thank you, if you're here, to Jim Wagner, Pete Seeger, Luke McCarthy, Regina Grisharber-Denton, Christopher Lovejoy, and 2 others. And I appreciate this is a big question, so sorry it's a kick-off one, but please can you explain what you would do to support cycling, walking, the use of electric vehicles and public transport in Merton, as well as enforce speed limits? In effect, what is your transport policy?
And I've got a minute to do that. Yeah, great, fantastic. So, the main issue with transport in Merton is that a lot of our town centres, in fact all of our town centres, are based around traffic gyratories. What you need to do if you want to fix transport, I think, is threefold. You have to look at ways to make Merton a better place to work, to walk and cycle and to be. Now, you can do this in terms of cycling by looking at the strategic transport cycle routes the TfL have identified. The most dangerous junctions in the borough, we should be improving those. That would help with cycling across the borough. In terms of making it a better place to be, to walk, well, there's a number of things you could do about that, and I can't cover that in a minute, but I hope to come on to a lot of those things. Public transport in the east of the borough, especially public transport in the east of the borough, is particularly poor, and we need to look at that. That obviously involves TfL. I've got a very few seconds left. I'm not going to get onto speed limits, but 20-mile-an-hour speed limits are a health issue, because if you get hit at a slower speed, you suffer less injury. Roadworks is the other thing I'll say, but I didn't get a chance to come on to that. We've got to use the lane rental scheme.
Thank you. So I know it's a big question, and it covers a lot of ground, but have a go in the minute that you've got, please. Ross.
Fantastic, thank you. And thank you, Jim, Luke and the team for this question. We've worked with you over the years since this administration came into place. And over that period, we have been working on our walking and cycling strategy as a borough, which helps create that overview in the whole borough, how we can be better connected in terms of promoting walking, cycling and wheeling right across the borough. I mean, we do have a challenge in the borough, particularly in the east of the borough, around public transport. There is no tube station in Mitcham, and there are challenges there, and there is a reliance on the overground line and buses. So it is that partnership work with Transport for London, which is the strategic transport partner in London. But we have had a strong track record over the past 4 years, whether that's improving pedestrian crossings, rolling out a whole number of zebra crossings in the borough, right across the borough, and making sure that more people can take part in cycling through e-bike hire schemes and a lot more.
Okay, thank you. And then we move through to Ed, please.
Thank you. I came on my electric bicycle this evening, and my car is electric, and I was delighted when I was a councillor a few years back to actually set the wheels in motion to restore and close the missing link on the Wandle Trail, which is a key cycle route. I told them the exact route, I got it in the local plan for Merton as a defined priority, so I'm all about cycling. I've mentioned Reform UK Merton's ambitions for the town centre, to create a proper town centre in the middle of Wimbledon and have a concert tour. But my ambition for cycling is, I think it's very feasible to link up the 3 main town centres of the borough of Merton. That means linking Wimbledon town centre with a beautiful cycleway all the way through to Mitcham and all the way through to Morton in a beautiful triangle. It's very, very feasible. It just needs resolve and determination. And I've been quite shocked to see the council administration not even bother applying for some of the cycle grants that have been available. Hundreds of thousands of pounds, claims it doesn't have enough money, but then it doesn't even bother applying for grants. Well, I applied for lots of government grants and got a lot of them, and it's very doable. I would link up the 3 town centres with a wonderful segregated cycleway network for Merton. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan.
Yeah, thank you. We're big fans of electric vehicles, and we helped initiate the rollout of electric vehicle charging points. What we'd like to do next is make it easier for those houses and roads where you don't have off-street. And there's a scheme where you can create gullies in the pavement and then run cables through to charge from your own home. It's cheaper that way, and people would like the certainty of being able to charge near their homes. So that's something that we definitely want to roll out further to make it easier for everybody to choose electric vehicle. At the moment, you can only really do so if you happen to have your own driveway. Also, another thing we want to focus on is getting utility companies to actually fix the roads properly when they're digging them up and be more quick about it and stop all the hassle, because what puts people off is roadworks. That's dangerous for cyclists, dangerous for pedestrians. We also want to fix the payments, because if the payments are all nice, then people will walk more. And that's the best form, in my opinion, of exercise. So focus on payments, fixing the roads and pushing electric vehicles. So that's our main focus.
Thank you. And then finally, Pippa, please, the question on transport.
So the Greens have always advocated for better active travel modes. It's not that we hate cars. There's always a misconception about us with that one. But essentially, it's about the principles. It's about a fairer allocation of space. There's an awful lot of congestion, and it results in dangerous passage for cyclists, for walkers, for wheelers. And it's also unsafe in terms of air pollution and dangerous junctions. So basically, it's really hard to answer this question in the time given, but what we would want to see is, as I say, a gradual, fairer allocation of space which reduces danger. Oh, and in terms of EVs, I think it's important to say they're not a panacea, but we understand they have their place. We understand that some people need motor vehicles.
Okay, thank you. Right, so that was quick-fire transport policy, but we've got some good pointers there, I think, from where the parties are. So, the second area that was most asked about, probably no surprise, is the development, that's me telling myself out, is the development by the All England Lawn Tennis Club into Wimbledon Park. So we only got one question on it, but we had a number of people ask questions, so thank you to Mary Fitzhenry, Susan Cusack and 3 others. And in summary, what is your party's position on the development and on the restricted covenants? So, Ross, we're kicking off with you.
Yeah, and thank you, Susanna. Yeah, there. Thank you for the question. As we have always said as an administration, we respect the independence of the planning process. I understand that is now being appealed through the court process. And what we have always stated on public record is that we would respect the covenants. So if planning permission were to be granted, it would be up to the All England Tennis Club to demonstrate how that meets the covenants that are on the land.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's move through now. Ed.
Put simply, the development is excessive. The show court is too big, there are too many courts, so we need to renegotiate it and enforce our government rights to get the right deal for the excellent residents associations and the Friends of the Parks groups. But it's important that people do not make up stories and false information about the story. So my question is, I think, for the politicians who've been making up that false information, can you explain why, please, why you're talking about telling the residents of Merton that there are 9 kilometres of roads when actually what the 9 kilometres are buff, beige, gravel paths about this wide. Please explain why, and I'm looking at the Liberal Democrats here, why you are telling the residents of Merton that, and why you're telling us building inside Wimbledon Park, when actually the All England development is on the other side of the lake, and you can't even see it from Wimbledon Park. I don't think you've even been to Wimbledon Park. And why are you telling people, or why are the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives telling people it is permissive, when permissive is a technical legal term that disapplies a highways legislation, it does not serve to disapply Section 106, and it's going to be a legally binding Section 106 agreement, which is not permissive. Please answer those 3 questions.
Okay, so thank you. You're not asking questions, but good try. Right, okay, Dan, please.
So the Conservatives' position is very clear on this. We would enforce the covenant and we back the Save Wimbledon Park campaign group. We have done all the way through, and the group knows that. We attended the protest outside the High Court when they did their challenge, and we very much support the residents in their attempt to stop the All England. Their scheme was, the All England scheme is far too big, far too excessive. They need to go back to the drawing board and actually meet with the public and actually get some ideas. And Save Wimbledon Park campaign group have their own ideas. They got a special architect in who does this, and they had a public meeting last week which I attended. So that's what we need to focus on, and that's our position on that.
Okay, thank you very much. And Pippa?
So Merton Greens have long held the position that the proposal is excessive. I think one of the particular angles that we come in from is that the council declared a climate emergency in 2019 and have carbon reduction plans, but this plan from the AELTC is massively at odds with that. We also think that the existing requirement of 10% biodiversity net gain is no more than window dressing, because we think that the process for establishing that are far from robust. So if you want to have a party who tips the tips the balance in favour of parties that are against the proposals, then you should vote Green. We really feel strongly that if this proposal is allowed to come to fruition, it will set a really dangerous precedent for building on land which is supposed to be protected and it should be for perpetuity.
Lovely, thank you. And then finally we have Anthony.
Thank you, and thank you to the questions, and also thank you to Ed as well for asking several more questions, I think. When the All England Club bought the land in 1993, they did so at a cut-down price because they made legally binding promises that they would not build on that land. Now, they are covenants that sit within the right of the council to enforce, and the council should actively be seeking to enforce those, whatever the outcome of the planning process. This is a separate thing, it's in the council's gift to do that. Legally speaking, it's nonsense to say that it's for the All England to show whether they're meeting the covenants. These are Merton's rights, held on behalf of Merton citizens, and it's for the council to enforce those. It's a significant development which will have a huge environmental impact. Ed has kindly highlighted some of the impacts it will have, and I think the Save Wimbledon group and lots of other residents are very, very aware of the impact it will have. And I think if there seems to be a broad consensus, not quite sure about reform, but a broad consensus that actually we need to do more, but it needs to be active, and it needs to not be sort of weasel words around letting All England determine whether they are breaching the covenants.
Thank you. Okay, great. Thanks for that question. Got it out of the way. Okay, so now we have a question from Asher Newsom, which is about the council's £75 million legacy fund. So what is your party's policy on how that legacy fund should be used? And we're going to start off with Ed.
Well, there's so much to talk about here on the public realm and planning, I think, just the sorts of things you can do. I spoke about, when I was in the council, I knew all about applying for community infrastructure levy and these funds and the Section 106 funding. So I spent a lot of time applying for government grants, and I raised funding during the pandemic, and even though we were in opposition, managed to build the park at Gap Road Gardens on Plough Lane. It was derelict land, and we just replanted the whole thing, got wonderful grading, planted trees, and a wonderful pocket park. Another thing I did was apply for similar funds from a whole variety of different sources, and we redid the Haydens Road North, all the shop fronts there, planted trees and the pavements there as well. So that was £1 million of shop front improvements. All the shops got a new uplift. So those are the sorts of things, new green spaces and doing up the shop fronts in town centres. That's good for young people, encourage money to come in, better shops, better economy, better tax intake and all this sort of thing. So those are exactly the sorts of things, green spaces and shop fronts in town centres are what we channel to. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And if we can give the mic to, sorry, there we go. Okay, Dan.
Yeah, thank you. So that money we think should be spent on physical and environmental improvements in the borough. So I mentioned trees at the beginning on my introduction. We could plant a lot of trees with that money, and we could make the borough a much more nice and friendly place to be. There's things like the children's parks that could do with upgrades. There could be facilities that could be done. We could look at shop fronts, as been mentioned by Ed. That's something that we do as well. We're very keen to improve things like London Village High Street. That needs some improvements. So we're very keen to help businesses and the community. And one thing we have done in the past in opposition is things like Wimbledon Hill Road. We reopened the Toynbee Fountain at the top of the hill. We've helped the heritage things such as Wimbledon Society with some of their projects, and also things like community assets like museums. So Wimbledon Museum, the Village Museum, and such things, we would want to support those with this money. So it's all about protecting the heritage, the built environment and the community assets.
Thank you, great. Okay.
I don't mean to sound like I'm dodging the question with this one, but we really believe strongly that a neighbourhood is a place that develops according to the needs of its residents, and that therefore residents' views are key to how the development is shaped. So I'm not going to sit here and come up with some kind of wish list. I think, broadly speaking, I would like to acknowledge that Morden and Mitcham, particularly Morden at the moment, is in desperate need of investment. I'm not saying that everything is hunky-dory in Wimbledon, but it certainly is a poor relation. And I say that as a Morden resident. I also would, because I'm not at the council, I don't know exactly, I have to confess, how the money could be spent, if there are restrictions on the way it is spent. But we feel desperately in Merton Greens that the lack of housing, there's 10,500 households at least on the housing register, is a really, really important issue. So perhaps money that goes towards making sure that empty properties are brought back into use, or we could somehow buy the supply for more social housing. I've got the red flag, I've got to stop.
Lovely, thank you very much. Anthony?
Thank you. So the Legacy Fund comes from the Council's good fortune in selling a health and safety business for a large capital sum, and this gives us a real opportunity to do something big. There's lots of smaller projects that we could do, they're all fantastic, and actually supporting community groups is great. But the real legacy, I think, the real challenge would be to make Merton Council a council home owning local authority again. We have a housing list of about 10,000 households, one of the largest in southwest London. We have a large number of people in temporary accommodation. We can buy and build council housing, bring those people closer, and actually save money as well, because owning that stuff ourselves would save money because we could claim more back in housing benefit. The other thing to look at is modern regeneration. How long have we waited? 30, 40 years, it needs to be done. We have a capital sum, let's get on with it.
Thank you. And then finance, this one is Ross.
Very well, thank you. And I know opposition councillors will say it was good fortune, but actually I would say it's because of the political decisions we took. We were able to sell a business for £186 million that we put no capital money into, which gave us this large receipt, half of which we invested to pay down our debt, so we now have one of the lowest debts of any local authority in London, which means we're not paying huge sums of interest. We're actually being able to spend that money on services. Now turning to the community fund, which we set up, £3 million a year for residents to decide what they want it to be spent on. We've got a board that is made up of residents from across the borough, from different parts, different corners, representative, that have been shortlisting ideas that the wider resident group have put forward. And a few months back, they agreed what the first £3 million would be spent on. So park upgrades, water fountains, other things that will make that money that we got is a true legacy. And what I would say about house building that the leader of the opposition was talking about, we are already building council-owned housing. We have started on site in Farm Road.
We're done, thank you. Lovely, thank you. Got to be tough on everybody, I suppose, so but thank you. Really good question as well, thank you. Okay, so our next question, and we'll be starting off with Dan on this one, so I might just pass the mic down to you. Thank you. It's another big issue, climate emergency, and we've had questions from Helen Clark-Bell and one other, but kind of trying to give a bit of focus. What would be your 3 priorities that you would focus on here in Merton that would help families and households combat climate change themselves, particularly with a focus on reducing the use of fossil fuels? Bearing in mind you're the local authority and obviously there are limitations what you can do, but what would you do to help support families and households?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So one of the key things we want to try and achieve is a better built environment and also electrification. So we were pioneers of rolling out electric vehicle charging points. That was an idea we pushed for many years before the council started doing so. Now, we could also look at changing the planning system. We might need government help to allow us to do so, but you're probably aware that a lot of the time you're not allowed to put solar panels on your roof if you're in a conservation area. Well, that needs to be got rid of, that rule, and allow everybody to do as much as they can, because people can then save a lot of money. We'll also look at providing better and improved advice to households on how they can improve installation in their homes, how they can look at solar panel installation, how they can look at converting to electrification of their homes. So that'll be the approaches that we take on this. It's all about electrification and improving the house and the build fabric.
Thank you very much. And then if you can hand over to Pippa, please.
I have to agree with Dan that it's about energy use in the home. Renewables are absolutely essential to reducing carbon emissions, as well as bringing down bills and giving people a kind of energy security. So I think we would aim to bring better value solar energy and heat pump schemes to homeowners and to landowners. Now, we realise that that is unsuitable for some properties and inaccessible to private renters and residents of housing associations. So there's been a lot of work to be done to work, for example, with housing associations to insulate existing stock where necessary. I think that in terms of the way renewables are funded, people need help. There needs to be a better scheme where people can apply for grants, because at the moment the cost is too inhibitive for most people. So I think that's really the main thrust of it.
Thank you. And then Anthony.
Thank you for the question. There are three areas, I think: reducing energy use, air pollution and the natural environment are the three focuses. So reducing energy use. Transport is the biggest producer of carbon emissions. We need to look at public transport, we need to look at the electrification, get that done. The electrification of the council's fleet needs to be done. There's a huge scope for retrofitting and information for residents. It's quite, you need to be quite involved to know how to properly retrofit your house and save energy and save money. Air pollution, not strictly speaking a climate emergency issue, but linked. HGVs rat running through residential roads, it's a safety issue, it's an air pollution issue. We want to look at enforcing weight limits on residential roads and working with online providers to make sure that sat-navs aren't directing people the wrong way. We also want to look, lastly, at the natural environment. That's about resilience, building resilience. So we want to look at ways to involve our parks groups in exactly how our parks and open spaces are used in a more meaningful way. Canopy cover in the borough. Only 3 wards in the borough have proper canopy cover, and there's my red flag, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you very much. And then Ross?
Sure. I think my focus on these 3 areas would be focus on transport, on buildings and bringing down bills for residents. So focus on transport. I love hearing the opposition claim credit for something the administration has achieved. I guess that's cross-party consensus around the EV charging rollout that we have right across the borough. Over 900 lampposts and EV chargers, making that switch and that transition more attractive for residents from petrol and diesel to EVs. Keeping the EV permit charges lower than you do for regular cars. And that is also the grant that the council provided on top of the Mayor of London's grant around ULEZ. So we were unique, we were only one of 2 councils, we were the first to add an additional £1,000 for residents within Merton to scrap their polluting cars to go to EV. On buildings, we would work through our local plan with developers. It's one of the most greenest local plans in terms of environmental challenges to developers, and also continue building our council homes to the highest environmental standards. As we have seen with the first 75, that would be nearly passive house standards.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got to be tough on everybody. There's so much. I know, but actually everybody's got a lot of very specific points. And the final contribution from Ed.
I've already mentioned cycling plans, and I like trees as well. You could line whole avenues like Durnsford Road very cheaply with lines of trees. I don't know why it hasn't been done yet. The council spends its money on absurd things like spending 20 years on LTNs and things like that. But the real issue here, you talk about the cost of living, the Conservatives taxed, and as did Labour, to 78% our gas bills. When you put the light on here, 60% of that is powered by natural gas. Why do we ship it across the world from America, from Qatar, Russia as well into Europe? We have gas fields in our own country. We switch them off. How obscene it is to talk about the cost of living. You Conservatives tax oil and gas production to 78% of profit. That's why you closed down Keir Starmer, banned all gas fields. The Jackdaw gas field would supply 10% of the UK gas. We need gas for our electricity to power our homes and industry for the next 30 years. So don't talk about fossil fuels being a bad thing. We use fossil fuels every day, and we will continue, because it's going to take 10 or 20 years to increase renewable energy until it's totally reliable. It's not reliable yet for 100%, so let's not talk about the cost of living, closing half of the country down. You closed our energy down by closing down the gas fields and taxing them.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I'm not aware of any gas fields in Merton, but thanks. Okay, so next question. And Pippa is going to be kicking off with this one, please. And thank you to Carol Lovelock, Hannah Dunnell and Oriel Glanville. 3 people asked this very specific question, so it's obviously something that's been raised before, which is, what is your approach to using glyphosate in parks and pavements? It's known to have links with cancer and be extremely harmful to wildlife and pets. But some of the boroughs have already switched to alternative ways of clearing weeds and looking after parks and open spaces without harming wildlife, and what would your party do?
Thank you. Well, we vehemently disagree with the use of glyphosate, and we would absolutely advocate, we would want a no-spray approach. Now, there is a new company who is coming in to manage the green spaces. Glendale Services is taking over from ID Verdi later this year. I don't know if we know that. And they were asked at a meeting with the various friends groups about whether they were going to use glyphosate, and they said that they were going to try to use it minimally. But as the question has intimated, there are there are other boroughs and other parts of the country which have phased it out. I think that what we don't really understand is this obsession with keeping away certain types of greenery. Glyphosate is so dangerous that I think we need to ask ourselves the question, what is more important, some so-called weeds, which arguably you might not want to even see as weeds, their life, their growth, their biodiversity, or just putting people's health at risk.
Thank you. Great, thank you. We'll continue with that.
Thank you. I suspect all of us tonight will say that we want to use glyphosate less or not at all. I don't think there'll be any other consensus. We've been shocked at times when the council, we've been told that the council doesn't use glyphosate in parks and open spaces, and then we find out it does. We've been told at times that it doesn't use it on Merton Garden Streets, but then it makes it quite difficult for the Garden Streets volunteers to actually operate the situation, the circumstances. And so we've been pushing them to make that easier for them to work in those bounds. If you want to move to a completely non-glyphosate approach to weed management, the alternatives, according to the council's sort of tests, were incredibly expensive because they needed to be applied time and time after again. Now that was the council's trials. Other places are doing it in a better way. Other councils seem to be a bit more advanced in this. So I think we'd want to learn from some other councils about what works.
Okay, thank you. And then Wes.
I would like to echo those comments. I think we would love to be able to use it less. And I know, Carol, this is very personal to you, the story that you have on this subject. And I know that in recent months we've been working more with Merton Garden Streets, which is a network of volunteers who plant the lovely little flowers, bulbs, plants around tree pits on their streets, to see how we can formalise that agreement where they, on their street, don't have glyphosate, and the volunteers within that street, as long as there is agreement with those residents, are able to do the weeding instead of using that treatment. And I do think we do want to learn the lessons that other local authorities are doing to see how we can reduce that use of the chemicals there. I know that from our own pilots, as Anthony said, it did need more and more treatment to do that, and it wasn't an effective alternative. But once we get into a position where it can be, we will look to change that system.
Thank you very much. Ed.
Yeah, I don't think this one's too complicated. Of course, it should be a national issue. It should either be permitted or it's regulated, and I think effectively it is regulated. So we would keep it to a minimum. We wouldn't ban it altogether, but I do know that a lot of London councils have tried to ban it, and what happens next. 2 months later, you've got weeds growing all over the place, and they go back in, and it's very expensive for the contractors. So that's just something to manage properly. But I'm a fan of minimising artificial fertilisers and so on, and chemicals, especially in parks. I support rewilding. It's quite, you get Wimbledon Park, for example, the corners can look an awful lot nicer, and take it back to what it was in the days of Capability Brown, just by using corners and pockets of rewilding that don't necessarily need mowing all the time, but can be left to grow and meadowed, cut once or twice a year, and it's better for the wildlife and insects and all this sorts of things. So I do support rewilding quite a lot in parks. It's better management and it's better for the ecology and habitat, and then you don't even need to worry about things like these carbon fertilisers that cause so much damage. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you for the question. We would use that in a targeted way, these glyphosate. They are still regulated, even though they are increasingly being banned. There are problems with it, as some people have outlined already, but the alternatives aren't as good. So things like citric acid treatment, steam, foaming, manual weeding, they can be expensive, you have to keep repeating it. So we would focus only on more difficult areas or known hotspots on roads where people complain a lot about these. Parks can be left alone. I think parks could do with more flowers and planting, but people do complain about the state of the streets, so we will want to focus on the streets. I do agree with the option of the garden street scheme, where if a road wants to opt out, and as long as they agree with the council to actually maintain the roads themselves, they should be allowed to get on with it, and then they can choose what method they would like. So it's increasingly popular in hillsides and places like Denmark Road. And if more people want to do that, more power to their elbow.
Lovely, thank you. Thanks everybody, and thanks for that question as well. So, a sort of related issue, I think, kind of finishing where you were down there, talking about issues that I know many people care deeply about, which is how small businesses can thrive in the borough. And Fiona Bomer was interested to know, what can the council and what would you do to help small businesses that are struggling to survive? Many independent shops and restaurants struggle, particularly in the village, and it's not just about survival, it should be about the diversity on the high street and how the council policies can help businesses to thrive. And we're back to you, Anthony, to go first, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. Another one that's really difficult to do in a minute. I think the approach to small businesses is threefold. Firstly, you've got to get the basics right. You've got to make our town centres, high streets, shopping parades, nice places to be. That means better street cleaning, better dealing with the waste and the management of waste from shops. Easier to sit outside, easier to congregate. There isn't very few places in Wimbledon town centre where you can be without having to pay to be there. There's not really much in the way of public space. You've got to look at measures to support local businesses. The biggest challenge for businesses is our business rates, national insurance rises. They're the real challenges. There are things the council can do. We've got an idea for an enterprise relief fund. We can apply, we can put in some of the council's money and get money from government to support certain types of businesses by reducing the cost of their rates. And lastly, we need a vision for businesses. Merton doesn't have a business strategy. We need to get together with local business organisations, thrash out what Merton is about, and what we need to do to change it to make it better in terms for businesses. My particular pet project is creative industry.
Thank you. 1 minute, thank you. And we will be finishing early at 9:30, so I'm sure that the candidates will stay and talk about the issues that I haven't managed to cover in a minute. Ross, the high streets.
Fall backwards off this chair. It's not very secure. But that aside, so I think there are three areas to focus and look on. Whether it's to try and encourage footfall and what the council can do in that space, so whether that is keeping the cleanliness levels within the high streets and shopping parades, which we have committed to, a more intensification of pressure wash footpaths, planters that you would have seen adorned in our town centres, and other shopping parades that were put in to draw people into the town centre, or those facades that we recently completed in Long Thornton Ward, which customers are then attracted to stay and to go in. It's also about more money in the pockets of residents so that they can spend that money in the local economy. And we have supported seeing a 50% increase of businesses becoming London Living Wage employers through us being accredited through our grant system. And so that means people that get the London Living Wage are more likely to spend that money in their town centres. And then it's about learning from businesses and how we can improve.
Great, lovely, thank you. Okay, and we're moving on to Ed.
Very much want reform, Merton wants to very much help small businesses. First of all, you think of a street scene, and where you start with the basic things like the bins that are overflowing, the street cleaning. A lot of the areas still, I'm afraid, with the chopping and changing of the Veolia, from the outsourcing, from the changing of mine, every time you see a bin that's overflowing in Merton, just remember that the council is paying millions of pounds of taxpayers' money to a contractor, Veolia, to empty those bins, but they're not being done. They're not managing the contracts properly, and they're not so you see dirty streets a lot of the time. That's an important one. Second, when big projects are blocked, and I'm talking about modern regeneration that they've been working on for decades, they blocked the new hospital in St Helier. Makes absolutely no sense. Why would you block a new hospital? When you've got a big construction project, it fills the local community and the supply chain and all the contractors with a wonderful, strong economy for small local businesses. So don't block those big projects like St Helier Hospital, like the modern regeneration. Just get on in a matter of weeks and months and get them going, not decades. That's my second bit of advice. The third bit of advice I say is write to Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and tell them to stop the revolting tax on pubs and on individuals businesses who can no longer make a return in London.
Thank you. Dan, please.
Yeah, so I also like pubs, and me and Ed used to regularly sit in the Alexandra when he used to be a Conservative. Anyway, so one thing we would do is help small businesses. There are a lot of young people looking for work, so the council has a role here to help play to try and link up people with work. So that'd be one thing we want to do. I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers, so we work closely with Wimbledon and the Merton Chamber of Commerce to work out targeted schemes that actually businesses want and that we can actually do rather than us just pretending that up front. One thing we have been told by businesses is the cost of parking. So when people try to visit businesses, they get whacked with high parking charges or overzealous parking enforcement, and that puts people off. And that's particularly the case in Rains Park and Wimbledon Village. So we need to also look at more inward investment and support the business community. Improving the streets is quite key, so we've supported shop fronts before with improvements. But we can also look at what licensing and planning powers to make them as flexible and reasonable for businesses as possible.
Thank you very much. And Pippa, please.
Well, people have already touched on the fact that the rental of space and the business rates are too high. I'm not going to pretend to know the mechanisms to bring them down. All I can say is that Merton Greens, if elected, would seek to make it so that it was viable for people to find spaces and stay in the spaces, because we see some people who end up establishing themselves as successful and then just get priced out of it. I think I'd also like to build on what some others are saying about making the public realm more pleasant, somewhere to linger, somewhere more of a destination than to pass through. I don't think it's just about bins. I think I'd like to bring it back to something people were saying earlier. It's about congestion, it's about air pollution, it's about noise pollution. So we know that pedestrianisation can be controversial in terms of getting people out of their cars, but we feel hopeful that we could get residents on board very gradually with developments. And I talked earlier about a fairer use of space, so I think it's that. Just one more thing. We always note that Wimbledon has a business improvement district, but Morden doesn't. We'd like to address that.
Lovely, thank you very much. Thanks everybody. Lots of different areas coming out from all of you there. Right, we're going to be kicking off with Ross for this next question from Jonathan Dean, talking a bit about crime and the police. And now that the Wimbledon police station is closed to public walk-ins, which I know has been quite a controversial issue, what are your policies that will encourage the reporting of crime and also crime reduction across the borough?
Brill, and thank you for the question. It's something that Merton Labour have campaigned against in terms of the front desk closures at Wimbledon and Mitcham Police Station. Although the Met say only 5% of crime is reported to the front desk, they do provide a valuable area for residents to go in to seek advice and to get connected to the right services. So we've always opposed those views. We've written to the Met Commissioner about that, but we have been trying to enter in dialogue with the Met Police. And we have put a proposal to the Met Police to see if there is an opportunity for us to co-locate some council staff in Wimbledon Police Station and in Mitcham Police Station, and that they are able to help residents, whether it's to receive the right services that they require. I hope that they respond positively to it. Obviously there is an election going on and I don't expect a response to come through prior to that, although it would be lovely. So we will continue to work on that.
Thank you. Ed, please.
It's a really serious issue, crime. Sadly, tragically, just a few weeks ago, right outside this, on the Broadway, there was a fatal stabbing, and on the Broadway, just a few blocks down the junction with on King's Road. And if you go into Waitrose on a Monday morning in Wimbledon, you can see people go in there and help themselves to the vodka, whiskey, etc. And they're shoplifters, and they go in there all the time. There's security guards just stand there saying we're not allowed to do anything. So Reform UK has a very strong message on crime. We will change all that, and we will change the sentencing guidelines, and we'll actually build a prison or two as well, where the Conservatives forgot to build the jails. So we will take a much more robust approach, and we'll ask the local police authority as well to properly enforce things like community policing, go out on the beat. We want to see them much more, and we want to take a much sterner approach with shoplifting and actually make arrests and change the national laws as well, so people actually do get properly sanctioned when they are found guilty in the courts. And we also would encourage more use of stop and search. We don't understand why the Liberal Democrats always spend their time saying they don't like stop and search when there's been a tragic accident right outside this building a few weeks ago.
Okay, thank you.
Well, unfortunately we're not allowed to build a prison as Merton Council, so there's not much I can say about that. But I firmly believe that the police and the justice service should put more criminals away and let people out for who have said words that they shouldn't be put in jail for. But anyway, that's more of a national matter. Locally, we campaigned against the Mayor of London's closures of the police stations and front counters. It was counterproductive, and so we've been in dialogue with Met Police as well to see if we can partner, if we run the council, some of our buildings like the Civic Centre or libraries, to see if they'd be willing to enable the public to report in another way. A lot of this is in the gift of the Met Police, and they've gone radio silent before the election. One thing that the Met Police themselves have is a new website called Met Engage. That is a good way for the public. I'd encourage everybody to sign up, because you get to hear what's going on, and it's a way for information to get out there quickly. And also join your safe neighbourhood panels. So I attend the Hillside one 2 or 3 times a year that meets, and it's a good way to get the police to actually do stuff, because they do respond, including doing action at the Sainsbury's last week to stop shoplifters.
Thank you.
Thanks. When we're knocking on doors, we are hearing a lot about people complaining about shoplifting and also theft of and from their vehicles, and about a lack of visibility of police. It's really difficult to know what to do about that as a council, because I think the problem is more regional. It's about the underfunding of the Met generally, which really needs addressing, because if I take where I am in St Helier and Morden, there's a really hard-working team, and I think that every ward has a hard-working team. I think they don't have enough of a relationship with the residents, partly because of funding, but also, I mean, Daniel mentioned Met Engage. The Met are really trying to get more and more people to sign up to this, but I think what a lot of people don't know about is that 2 or 3 times a year, every ward police panel holds a meeting. Where I am, there's only about 5 or 10 people who turn up to it. So I really think that if we can address that, then residents developing their relationship with the police will involve in more reporting of crime.
Thank you. And then finally, Anthony.
Thank you. So around 900 crimes a year were reported at Wimbledon and village and police stations, which is actually quite a lot, and the profile of those reports wasn't something that seemed to be examined when the decision on the front counters was made. But I think the bigger issue is it represents a retreat of the police from our communities, the ability to access and to talk to police officers and to have a sort of stake in a sort of base in the community. So we do, like others have mentioned, want to look at co-location, both in terms of council buildings and also police buildings. The local police team in Wimbledon Town Centre is really keen on having a town centre police team so that they can have a team that focuses on the issues of the town centre and a team that can focus on the issues of the rest of the ward, because my ward is not just the town centre, it is bigger than that. There are other things that you could look at in terms of giving access to representative groups to look at the police's policies. It's about trust in the police and access to the community.
Thank you. Great. Everybody's in the groove now, so we're kind of sticking to 1 minute, which is excellent. So thank you. And we're halfway through, so well done. And on to a new issue here, a really important one raised by Mia Moores, Sarah Carroll and Kirsty Warwick. And we'll be coming to you, Ed. And it's about young people and the opportunities that they have. And kind of what would your plans be to support young people's skills development and employment? We all hear the stats about young people struggling to find work, and there's a rising number of NEETs, so that's those young people not in education, employment or training. And kind of combined with high tuition fees and living costs, it feels like a really tough environment currently. So what would you do to support people in Merton?
Yeah, great question. And to me, that's the real test of any political party. When you're talking about young people, it's a sort of test of how much integrity do your policies have into the long term. There are key stakeholders, because you're looking not just for a short-term gain, but you're looking for policies that are going to be beneficial to the community for 5, 10, 15, 20 years to come. And that's why Reform UK Merton's policies are all about those longer term things, because we are very much thinking of the young people. That's why we're looking at the town centres and not just tinkering around the edges. I want to do something really bold, so we finally have a proper town centre that's not just a shopping mall and has these plazas and wonderful shops and things like that. That's why we're talking about a concert hall as well, because around the concert hall you've got all the education that comes with it. You've got the digital education, you've got the school's involvement. It's a very broad-ranging cultural educational activity as well. So we're always thinking of the longer term benefits to the community when we're thinking about the policies for Wimbledon, whether it's the community, the shopping centres or the education system as well offered by. And the Conservatives have of course closed down education in the pandemic, and that was an absolute disaster for our young people, as is the 9% graduate tax. Yeah.
Thank you.
Student loans. Thank you.
Done.
That's another national policy about Ed, which we have no control of at Merton Council. So one thing we do have is an option to encourage adult learning in particular. So councils still have a say in schools as well, but increasingly that's set by government. But we can encourage young people to go into adult education courses. There's a place in Morden near the leisure centre, if anybody's been. And that tends to be historically aimed at those of retirement age, but we really should look at creating more courses and promoting more young people to go to that. One thing in government that we did do that was useful locally was the fires and apprenticeships and that sort of thing work quite well, and we can do some of that on a local level. Now, it's not in our gift to offer apprenticeships at companies, but we could call companies in, talk to our partners at Merton Chamber of Commerce and of Wimbledon, and sort of say to them, what can we do with business to help give young people a chance? So that's something we can certainly do. And to help with skills, we could partner with our volunteer sector to encourage young people to do charity work, to gain valuable skills that can hopefully then help with work.
Thank you.
So I think it has to start with dialogue with young people themselves, with schools, with colleges, with universities. I was a secondary school teacher for 13 years. I've also been a university tutor. This really resonates with me, this question, and I really feel for the younger generations who are finding it hard to find opportunities. I think there's something in what some people have said about, hope I'm not misunderstanding, like a relationship between local businesses and the schools and the colleges and universities to see what kind of opportunities there could be. Likewise, we even though it's a bit contentious, some of the events in the park, there are activities that go on within the park where I feel there's the potential for young people locally to be used to somehow build their experience. But as I said, it really has to start with dialogue. I want to find out what young people are saying, what skills they have, what they want to use, and how we're sort of underusing them at this point in time. So I want to be guided by them.
Thank you. Anthony?
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I mean, a huge topic. I'll talk briefly about 3 areas. I think if you want to make the area a great place to grow up, some of the issues are the big ones. You know, housing, affordable housing is one key issue. We've touched on the climate emergency in the environment. If we don't have, a resilient, climate, then there isn't much for our children. The second one is to touch on the things that Pippa has said. It's about giving young people a stake and making them feel that they have control and they have a say. You know, my son is 10 and he's just beginning to realise that some of the things that his dad does are sort of slightly strange. Apart from his job, he also has this thing where he's a counsellor and goes canvassing and does other things. It's occurred to him that he might be a counsellor, or he could be a counsellor. And I think that's, I'm sure I'll disabuse him of this, but that's, I think, no bad thing. We've got to look at ways to make people feel they can be involved. And lastly, you give people a reason to stay. Too many people grow up here and move away, young people move into the borough and then move away in time. Some of that is around jobs and training and long-term industries. The creative economies has a fantastic history in Merton. Let's build on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think this is a really important issue because the damaging impact that it can have on those young people, but also as a society, and it's incumbent on us to try and address this. And I think we are probably the only party that is focused on a pledge around this specific area in the election, and that's around our job brokerage service, Employ Merton, which will give a guaranteed access to any young person that needs or wants to use that service, and that service helps with CV writing, interview techniques, and linking up young people with job interviews, guaranteed job interviews, and that's using contractors that the council have. That's other businesses within the borough as well that will reach out to Employ Merton and say, we need this skill of this person, and then the job brokerage company will match them up. You can also secure it through Section 106 on big scale developments to make sure local people or local young people in care actually can have guaranteed job interviews or work on those sites. And as a council, we need to develop and grow our apprenticeship scheme as well to make sure that young people are seeing the opportunities that we have in the council. We're not just one service. There's finance, legal, a whole host of stuff, and we need to promote that and get out there and tell young people about those services.
Thank you. The next question has come from Deborah Crosby, and I suppose focuses around the issue about development in the borough, and I think it sort of unites some of the other issues we've touched on today, thinking about high streets, sense of community, being a great place to grow up. You will be aware, of course, about the plans to demolish the Communication Workers building just kind of up here on Broadway, and that there are concerns about that, and also about whether there's the infrastructure to support high-rise development that's taking place across the borough. So, coming to you first, Dan, for the Conservatives, what's your party's approach to overall development across the borough of Merton?
Yeah, thank you. So our main approach is we do not like tall tower blocks. They can exist in central London or elsewhere, but people consistently don't like them here in Merton, and we will change the development plan locally to reflect that. So we're very keen to work with organisations and community groups across the borough on this. People like the Wimbledon Union of Residents Association, Wimbledon Society, Mitcham Society, and everybody in between. And they make it clear what sort of things they like. So we would partner with them to see what they would do, create community workshops to see what could be acceptable to the public. And one area in particular for Wimbledon I would like to see is a advisory committee set up with councillors just for Wimbledon, plus lay members of the public, including specialists, to inform the council what will be acceptable to be built in the area. We could call it like an advisory planning committee community or something like that. But for too long, everything that's been built in Wimbledon has been determined by Mitcham councillors. We need more founders for Wimbledon, and we support anything to do with Wimbledon focus.
Thank you.
So we think that the biggest priority is to start to engage residents at the outset of any development process. At the moment, development is kind of done to, as opposed to with residents. Effective stakeholder consultation is really fundamental to securing equitable and durable and sustainable outcomes for any sort of community. But I think in Merton, consultations are too often run in ways where it seems that any meaningful public input seems to be the last things that the developers and the councils actually want. So, without wanting to sound too ambitious, what we would like to start to do is to overhaul the consultation system. I think Dan's partly getting at this. It's about the fact that there's a very established toolkit already out there for effective stakeholder engagement, where you would want people involved from the start with ideation and design workshops, for example, and you'd have ongoing mechanisms for people to make representations, because there's absolutely no reason why planning officers and developers and residents and elected representatives can't work together as opposed to at loggerheads as they are at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you. 150 The Broadway, which is just across the road, is within my ward, so I've already been working with residents to make their feelings known on the plans. Put simply, the government's approach to planning is to give local communities less choice and less influence, and that is the direction of travel. And also it is the case that by the time an application is made, it is actually very difficult to influence it and to have a say. So the real challenge actually is to open up the planning process at a much earlier stage, at a strategic stage. There's lots of things that the council's planning officers do to shape development as plans come forward. We need to create better access to those officers for the public, so that there can be a sharing of ideas of what is appropriate. So those officers are armed when they're in discussion with developers, and make this a much less developer-led kind of process. There are some things the council can do. The council's planning rules do have within scope for tall building design guidance. The council hasn't bothered to do that. It should do. That would help control development, and there's things that we can do in that way as well. Thank you.
I think development has an important part to play, not only for our economy, but for jobs, for housing, and for opportunities. But that doesn't mean it needs to be out of sync, out of kilter with the local community. We recently adopted a local plan, a legal document that we need to guide planning decisions within the council, which was well engaged with residents. It took over four years, if not more, for the planning inspectorate to do that. But that sets out the strategic borough-wide approach to development. And I understand concerns that residents have around particular developments, and it is a challenge. And we need to work with communities to ensure that it's right, not just for the local community, but the borough as a whole.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, look, I've already mentioned reform Merton's vision for the centre of Wimbledon in terms of replacing the shopping mall with a proper town centre. We have similar plan. The key to these big projects in town centres is joint ventures. So you need a commercial partner, you need a residential partner, and maybe somebody like TfL, like you've got in Morden. You can get those projects going in months, but we also have a plan for Mitcham, because the question is about the borough. So our vision for Mitcham is actually based around Fair Green and replacing all the shop fronts there, and then linking up, getting rid of the bus depot, which sits in the middle of Fair Green, restoring the gardens to what they were about 30 years ago, and then linking up all the ponds and the avenue all the way down to Mitcham Cricket Club and the cannons. It would be a wonderful green avenue to walk down and make Mitcham really something, Mitcham Village. And we think that's very affordable and very deliverable. Not a 40-year project like the Conservatives and Labour have one, more than redevelopment. There's something which could be done relatively quickly. Also, nobody's mentioned St George's House East. That is just horrifically large, far too much mass. It's something out of a business park in Reading. The centre of Wimbledon deserves much better than that. So that's the sort of thing we would stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, so quite a lot of ground covered there on some really big issues, so thank you, everybody. We're moving on to something that I know that many of you will kind of understand, and you'll probably know family who really struggle around housing. But was kicking off with you, Pippa, and Benjamin Leake and somebody else, another individual also asked about what are the candidates' plans to maximise social housing in the borough of Merton.
So, at the moment, I would say that the council is not doing enough to hold developers to account when it comes to providing the right amount of affordable housing, social housing in particular. We know that there's a 50% aspirational target, a so-called realistic target of 35%, but we also know that that's not necessarily being met too. So if we take, for example, Mitcham Gasworks, where 626 units have been agreed, and then as a kind of it's good that there's then going to be 146 which are for social rent. That's something that came after the application was approved, but it's only 23%, which is, as you can see, like way below the target. So I mentioned earlier about a lot of empty properties, and we really would like to buy the supply in that kind of way, because, as I mentioned earlier as well, there's at least 10,500 households on the housing register. They're not all homeless, but they are all in need of decent social housing that's appropriate to their needs. So I've got the red flag. I wish I could go on.
Will you be staying afterwards? Yes. Right, okay, so there you go. Right, Anthony.
Thank you. Really challenging question to deal with in a minute. There are some perverse incentives in the system, so you absolutely have to challenge developers, but at the moment it's actually easier to get a grant when planning permission has been given for no affordable housing. You can actually get a grant from the government and TfL to put more in, and it's a sort of bizarre sort of situation. Merton, hasn't built any council homes. They've started building some, but they haven't built any in the last 4 years. Most other councils, many other councils, have built hundreds, some thousands of council houses. Merton has not. We have to build council houses. We can buy as well. We can bring our temporary accommodation into the borough if we buy some housing, and that gives better quality housing and allows us to recover more of the housing benefit from government, which actually make it cheaper in the long run. We can use modular construction methods to build houses quickly as well, quickly and cheaply, and that will be a good way to kickstart our council housing programme.
Thank you. There's a housing crisis right across the UK, and it's of all tenures, not just affordable housing. The housing system, house building has failed so many people over the past few decades. But I was very clear when I became leader that we would start building the first council homes in a generation. That's starting from a base in a generation when the council hasn't had the resource, the staffing, etc. to start building that. So of course it will take some time to do that, but we have broken ground on those 3 sites. And we are ambitious to have a housing revenue account, which means that we will own and run social housing as a local authority. That means you need over 200 units, I think it's now gone up, but hundreds of units to operate as council housing. We are building the first 75, we're acquiring 145 off Mitcham Gasworks, and there is so much more. We're using government funding not only to help, grant funding, not only to help buy the affordable homes, but also to acquire street properties to help those families that are homeless and in need of a roof over their head.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll deal with the council housing first. I don't know if you know the Vix Bridge estate, which is Clarin. That need is desperate for redevelopment. You'll be shocked if you were to drive around this that some of the houses are crumbling. And I met the directors at Clarin. The first thing they said to me was they are amazed that Merton Council Administration has not come to them and actually done a deal with them to actually redevelop the whole of Ipswich. That will develop hundreds and hundreds of council houses. We could have done that in about 4 years. I'm amazed you didn't do it, because they complained to me about 6 years ago. There was zero interest from the council to actually develop that, and I just can't understand that. That's where there's a lot of council houses. It's crying out for improvement. Clarion want to invest. You just need to have the wherewithal, the business project team, to actually understand how to do it and get it delivered quite quickly. I mentioned, I keep mentioning the redevelopment of Wimblecomm Town Centre. In that is a big proportion of affordable housing and also some element of council housing as well. So that's the typical component of a big project like that. Those houses tend to be smaller flats for affordable housing and also for senior citizens as well. So what we don't want is the Colliers Wood temporary accommodation towers, which Labour administration is demanding and building across Colliers Wood, those 5 big towers of Criterion Capital. Those are what we don't want to see in the borough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Dan?
So something else that we've not really spoken about so far is the use of the housing associations. They are some of the biggest landowners of housing in the borough, so Clarion, Moat Housing and others. Lots of them have a lot of sites. Clarion have been updating a couple of those estates, but it would be good if we could push them to start working on other ones as well. So along with what the councils do, if they could do so. I remember looking at a scheme that the YMCA did a number of years ago, which was something called a YQ. It was a modular built self-contained units that was built off-site, and you just drop into place, hook up the utilities, and then all of a sudden you have a fast build, one-person units that you can then get single people off the waiting list. I know that's families, but you can then use our other resources to look at buying properties. As we mentioned, we recommended doing that as well. And also TfL Network Rail own a lot of land, and we really should be partnering with them to use that bit of land over stations, near stations, to build properties as well.
Thank you. Okay, we're coming up to around the last 3 questions. We're running a bit early, so I'm looking at David. Yeah. But anyway, we'll move on. One of the issues, I'm going to be coming to Anthony, back around to the beginning again, for this question. I think something that a lot of people feel really strongly about and has been touched on a bit already. It's about the high street, but particularly the link to health and well-being. There's a proliferation of fast food takeaways and gambling establishments on our high street. And Sophia Parente, who might be here tonight, has asked this question about what would you do to, I suppose, rebalance the high street to make it less focused on maybe some of those establishments, and also ensure that the high streets thrive with a whole diverse range of different establishments.
Thank you, and it's a really good question, and I think we've touched on some of the elements of this already. So we've got to make our high streets and shopping parades nicer places to be. That's the start of it. The council can't tell what businesses will pop up. They can't do that, but they have to create the environment where the right businesses can thrive and come. So if you make a place nicer, then the right kind of business may come. If you have the right schemes in place to support rates relief, like we talked about our enterprise relief scheme, then we can do some of that. If you have a strategy that looks at the kind of things that you might need in an area, whether that's public space, whether that's co-working areas, whether that's things for young people to do. When my son was younger, there is nowhere to go with a child that you don't have to pay to do something to be there, unless it's in the town centre. Obviously we've got fantastic parks, but if you're in the town centres, you have to pay, whether that's a soft play, whether that's ice cream or whatever. What is there we could do to look at those things? Air quality, again, is part of making our high streets and shopping parades a nicer place to be. We touched on HGVs running through our town centres. And I've got the red flag.
I think this is a rare thing, mostly in agreement with Anthony, particularly around high streets, and I think the focus on footfall and those activations that you can get to bring more and more people into a town centre and shopping parades is hugely important, whether that's investment in the public realm, driving up the cleaning standards, making it more attractive to come in, or whether there's different activations you can do, like we've trialled at Wimbledon Quarter, like we've trialled at Mitcham Fair Green, where you actually have small exercise, free exercise classes going on at these areas that will bring different sorts of people into the town centre and using those spaces, or whether it's the cultural events that we've been having at Mitcham Bandstand in the summer, or working with Wimbledon Bid in Wimbledon Town Centre, or the bandstand in Morden Park. It's how you do the public realm, but also draw more people in through those activations.
So thank you. Well, Reform Merton's focus on the 2 or 3 big town centres of the borough, being Mitcham, Morden and central Wimbledon, would obviously have an extreme beneficial impact on the high street, and so that's very much our priority. We write that into the local plan and insist that all planning decisions and all focus of the borough beyond those things. There are other things to do as well in other high streets, such as greening and more trees, a very simple thing to do, better shop fronts, there's a lot of opportunity for that. But they have more money coming in from the bigger projects if you allow them to go ahead and get them over the line quickly, and that is why they're so important. Then you've got more money to do what you want with the local business rates and the discounts. I mentioned the business rates already, but Merton Council prefers to spend £10 million on a council tax scheme, which is the most expensive in the whole country or the whole West, because they haven't had the wherewithal to actually look at the scheme and decide who actually needs the help on council tax. They just roll it out, they don't look at it, £10 million later every year, and they don't have money to fund the high street projects to the same degree and extent which we really need. When you free up the millions, then you can do things with the business rates, give the discounts, get the shops in, and that just lifts the high street, and plant more trees, and it's much better. And that's why we think we can offer Merton and Wimbledon a much better management with a proper group of professional people who will actually deliver projects on time and quickly and bring money into the borough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the main issues here is people will want stuff, but then will they use it? So there's an element of market, supply and demand. So we can try and help set the environment to create that market, and also we can try and work on the supply. So one thing the council could do more of is reaching out of the borough to meet business communities and try and seek inward investment and try and lobby people to come along and invest in shops and new types of things in the borough. One thing that has been quite a good success is Wimbledon Quarter, that formerly known as Wimbledon Centre Court Shopping Centre. They've now gone for mixed-use sites. It's not just shops. It's got places to do leisure. It's got places to still shop. It's got all sorts of things in there that brings a new sense of place. And if you can create a place that people want to go to, then you're more likely to get more mixed use of sites. So that's what other town centres like Kingston have done. We can do the same here. And then there's the wider things we've spoken about before, such as cheaper parking, make it a more hospitable environment, have places to eat, drink, sit down, rest, things for the kids to do, and stuff like that. So that will all help to create the right environment.
Okay, so obviously I can't disagree with all the calls to improve the public realm and to, as we've talked about before, reduce business rates, make property rents more reasonable. But in terms of the fast food question, I think that there does need to be some kind of research done into the ratio of fast food outlets to restaurants and cafes that have healthy eating options, and then work with council officers and residents to ensure that there's a better balance. But I also think that we need to acknowledge that there's really been, in the past couple of decades, an accelerating change in the nature of retail, such that the model of large chain stores and big shopping centres are definitely on the way, which is consumers are making more of their purchases online and expecting them to be delivered to their door. I'm not saying that everything should be delivered to the door, but I do think we need to acknowledge that, and that traditional retail space should arguably be repurposed in more creative ways. We've mentioned shared working spaces, but also community spaces for classes, workshops, exhibitions and rehearsals, maker spaces, art and music studios, swap shops, repair shops. You could even turn some into green spaces, perhaps even some homes, as well as leisure and entertainment opportunities. So I think we really need to acknowledge that the nature of retail has changed.
Thank you. Okay, these are the last 2 questions. I'm going to give, we've got a little ahead of time, but everybody likes to finish early. But I am going to offer candidates 2 minutes each because they're quite broad questions and I am a little nervous about asking them. So I do ask you all to respect maybe what the prayer at the beginning suggested, which is about civility, and I really want to avoid any personalisation. So they're quite big questions, so I'm going to give you all 2 minutes each. So, right, great. Okay, so the first one, we're going to start with you, Ross, is we have received a number of questions about, I suppose, conduct in public life and how politicians should conduct themselves, whether that's about morals or ethics or expenses, the use of public funds and behaviours. Avoiding any personalisation or any names, I'm not interested in that today. This is about the approach that you and your party takes around how councillors and people who are standing in public life should behave when representing their constituents in Merton.
Thank you. And it's something I take very seriously, and I think it's incumbent on all of us as leaders of political parties to lead with integrity. And I do think that it's also important that we are accessible to residents right across the borough, that we do have that engagement, and that it can be stuff that we disagree on. But we can disagree in a polite and understanding way that we agree to disagree. And that's why I started having a conversation with the leaders event, which it held 3 times in the last year, where members of the public can come in and ask me questions in a public forum about anything they want and choose. And I see a number of faces here that did come along to the most recent one, and that's why I hold a regular advice surgery in our libraries, right across the different libraries in our borough, for people to come in on a one-to-one basis if they've got issues or concerns with things in the local community, to raise that with me. And we give out our phone numbers, we give out our emails, and we do that because we want to hear from you. And that's not just from the Labour Party, that's from every party that sits up here. We are people that put ourselves forward in the public eye because we want to help, we want to do things, we want to see improvements. And that's not a party political point, that is something, you know, when many people that are councillors do have full-time jobs, they're staying late into the evenings after they've worked a full day in their job to 10:30 at night without seeing their family, without seeing their friends. It's something they do because they want to see the best in their community.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a really important issue. Everyone talks about integrity and honesty, transparency, things like that. It's the first of the Nolan principles that, of course, is set out, and when things go wrong, whether it's in Downing Street or anywhere else in the local council, it's the first thing that matters. And people who experienced it, and when it goes wrong, it's the worst thing, because it's the same as an employment contract. It's the first duties. Trust and confidence. You've got to be able to trust the people you're dealing with, and you've got to be frank and open. And you've got to be able to talk about the difficult issues as well. Maybe they are financial, but if you're not willing to talk about the difficult issues and actually be able to do so with respect and actually, you know, not getting too upset but having a frank conversation, then finding a way forward, then you're not going to be able to solve the problems that we all need to solve for the residents of Wimbledon and look at the longer term benefits. The other thing is, things do go wrong sometimes. So you can have a big project, you can have a planning application, or have an adult social care budget, or a children's services reprogramming, or whatever it is in a local authority. Sometimes things are going to go wrong. And part of the integrity and the principle known is that when things do go wrong, you just need to own up and talk about it and not try and hide it. And that's a really important thing. Things will go wrong in all our lives, and whether it's business, personal, and all this sort of thing. And if you're honest and just own up and talk about it, admit your mistakes, and adjust your conduct, and adjust your path of progress, then you can actually do a lot to improve things and respond to the residents and their concerns And that's why governance is so important as well. Governance is not just the thing you talk about. Governance involves speaking to your stakeholders. It might be the investors, it might be the business partners, most of all it's the residents. So, because at the end of the day, you're the people, all the people on this table have got to make sure their party service actually delivers some outcomes. It's your money which is funding the council, so the respect for the public purse is absolutely paramount when it comes to public integrity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, as the Conservatives Deputy Leader and Group Whip, I take this very importantly because anything wrong or might be a problem with my group comes to me to deal with. So I set very high standards for my colleagues, and if there's any problems, I'll deal with them, and sometimes quite severely. So we hold high standards in the Conservative Party, and we've had no problems in any of our candidates or existing colleagues for a very long time, ever since I've been doing this role. So that's when I can assure everybody, if there's any other problem, speak to me and I'll get it sorted. So integrity is also very important. I always do what I say, and I will always be supportive of people. The Nolan principles that have been mentioned, approach of how to act in public life, we take those very seriously, and we do sign something as councillors when we first join to say that what we do. We all have to uphold the council's code of conduct. That's signed at the council, but we also have our own parties, respective ones as well. We'll also try to be accessible to the public. That's something I've always encouraged my colleagues to do. I set an example, attending things like this tonight, but also attending residents' meetings, community events, and just being open. One of the things I always insist on is my colleagues respond to emails and be willing to meet the public. So if somebody's got a concern, be willing to go meet them. You don't drag them to the council building, try and meet them wherever the person is comfortable with. Sometimes that's a pub, sometimes it might be a church, sometimes it is the council building, or sometimes a person's own home. So we always try to be fair. We insist on good standards on social media because I know that's where most of the problem seems to be. So I always avoid any negativity on social media. I'll leave others to do that. I'm not going to mention his name. But it's very important that we are very fair, open, transparent, and fix any problems that do come up. And I have my address and phone number available so people can reach me anytime.
Thank you.
In terms of how to represent residents, it's quite simple. We should be a strong voice for them at the Civic Centre, at meetings with housing associations, meetings with the local police, meetings with the NHS, and so on. So I think that regular engagement with residents is really key to this. Some people have already given a flavour of how they might do that, but I think it's not happening. Well, I know it's not happening consistently across the ward. So as well as regular knocking on doors, and there are a lot of doors to knock on, I accept that, a monthly public meeting in each ward, one in person, one online, because hybrid is really difficult, I would say. But also enhancing the democratic process, letting residents know how they can take part. So many residents don't know that there's a mechanism of questions to full council, for example. They don't know how to engage, as I said earlier, with planning processes. But I think the other thing that I want to say is that I watch a lot of meetings that are in the council chamber, the ones that we're allowed to see anyway, and I see some really unhealthy tribalism, and I would want to try to get rid of that. I would like to see more collaboration. I've seen tribalism where parties are whipped and perfectly sensible motions and amendments are just voted down simply because another party came up with it. And there seems to be so much energy, I'm afraid, that can go into digging at other people within the council chamber. And I don't think that that's what the residents want to see. And I think that if a lot of people sat in the public gallery or watched the live streaming, they would just despair, actually, at the amount of energy that's going into that. So the Greens, we're not going to end up leading the council. We hope to get some councillors this May. We really are seeking to collaborate, and we really hope that others can up their game in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I probably shouldn't tell my boss at work, but being a councillor is the best thing I do. It's one of the best things I do. I have a day job as well, but it is a privilege. And I think, I'm sure all councillors, both on this podium and larger, would agree that it is a privilege to represent your electorate. And that means helping them with any number of problems and meeting them where they are and understanding what their issue is and trying to solve it. Sometimes when you don't agree with them, you're their advocate and you are trying to solve their problem in the best way possible, ensure that things are done fairly, decisions are made appropriately, and so on. I think there is a greater challenge in democratic politics at the moment. People don't feel that they have control. People don't feel that they can influence things, and that encourages populism, easy answers to complex problems, because otherwise you're not making the change that you want to see. So I think the challenge for the next term is, how do we as councillors involve people? How can they participate? How can they feel that they've got some control over the decisions that are made? Part of that is admitting when things go wrong and talking about why you're doing things, going to great efforts to explain things, making sure that council comms and publicity is about giving people information, empowering them, not simply advertising and promoting what the council does. Sadly, in the last term, we've seen some measures to restrict the ability of councillors within the council chamber to ask questions and to speak. So smaller parties within the council have had the time limits. They're allowed to speak for sometimes only a minute. Their job is to represent their constituents. They should be able to speak and raise things and put proposals forward. And a lot of that's been taken away, and we would look to restore many of those things.
Thank you. I think those are really fantastic answers across the piece, actually. There's an awful lot of consensus there, which is great to see. Okay, so this is the last question. Again, you've got, and actually on that last question, I want to thank Yasmin Chowdhury, Charles William and Jill Hall for that. It was a really helpful prompt for the panel. So this is the last question, coming from Mark Emerson, Julie Reynolds, but I imagine quite a lot of people will also reflect on this, that, and we're coming to you, Ed, first, that, we see a lot of angry and polarised debate between people in politics, internationally. We have had questions that we didn't table today about international crises, because that isn't an issue necessarily in the local authority. But kind of sort of following on from the question we just had about kind of behaviours in public life, what would your party and you personally do to help develop and support community cohesion and inclusivity? Everybody's talked about it, I think, on the panel tonight, but I think it's a really important piece that for everybody here to leave some final thoughts with about how you maybe help to move away from the polarisation and the division and think about how we start to bring people a bit more together.
Look, we're a very optimistic party. We believe that fundamentally people do want to integrate and work together and live together, so we very much believe that. And we also believe that we do, however, have to face the difficult questions. And we haven't actually spoken about probably the first issue in the borough, which is the council budget every year. That hasn't been on the agenda. So when you are you have to resolve these very difficult issues. And if you are putting your head in the sand because you look at the council budget and you think 70 or 80% of it is being spent on this or that, and no one is allowed to look at it. And that happens at the national level, and it happens at the local level as well. If you're not willing to do that and actually face the difficult issues, which we know are out there, then things will get worse and worse and worse, and it becomes more divisive and more polarised, and that isn't what we want. We want to have a community that works for us all and that is sensible, and that we do tackle the difficult issues rather than push them under the carpet and pretend they don't exist as our country changes, it becomes worse and worse, the economy, etc. And as our local authority, whatever, isn't tackling issues and presenting the solutions to build our town centres or whatever it is in the future. So we do have to face those difficult issues, and if we try and sweep them under the carpet, I think you'll find they get even worse. So we're approaching it from let's bring about the changes, both locally but also nationally as well. And we think that actually by not hiding from the issues and actually dealing with them, that will lead to a much less polarised society and a much more integrated, cohesive society, which we're all going to want to have, we all want, and it's going to be better for all of us in our community. So I think that is where we're coming from, faced with difficult issues, and have a solution for them, rather than just pretending they don't exist, and then we'll have a much better, harmonious society. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very important question. You can't do much about the international, so for instance, nothing to do with Gaza, nothing to do with Trump, nothing to do with whatever else is going on in Westminster, but we can look at what we can do locally. So one thing I've always been a keen fan on, and like to encourage lots of people to do, is join civic societies, so things like the Wimblecomm Society, Mitcham Society, Mitcham Cricket Green Community Heritage Group, and there are others out there, or charities such as AFC Dons Action Group. They're a very good charity, because people from all different backgrounds tend to mix and merge and get on better when they're involved in a common effort. So it could be safeguarding heritage, it could be volunteering at the windmill. I've recruited several people to do that. The walk and talk movement that set up a few years ago is a genius idea. It allows people to go on walks on a Saturday morning, meet up with people that have never done so otherwise. And occasionally, some of us politicians should go along. So I try to go to a few of those a year. We help set up the one in London Village. So trying to do things like that will help go a long way. We used to have interfaith awareness sort of engagement events. I haven't seen those recently. That could be something we could look at, working with the churches, the synagogue, with the mosques and various others, the temples. There are lots of those in the borough, but they all operate most of the time independently. So trying to get those joined together, particularly after what we've seen with those attacks on Golders Green. Well, that scared me, that did. I mean, if it's happening there, where next? So we've got to sort of look after each other in our communities, encourage interfaith dialogue, and we can set an example from the council.
Thanks. So, Merton, well, not just Merton Greens, the Green Party really believes strongly that people have more in common than that which divides them. So we want to use every mechanism available to promote equity and diversity and inclusion, to celebrate our diversity, to champion our common humanity. I think that it obviously means challenging all forms of discrimination. But in particular, we really, I want to say tonight, we abhor the rise of divisive rhetoric and actions that are being used to intimidate minorities within our borough at the moment. And it's a contentious topic, but there are certain objects that have appeared in our high streets. There's also graffiti, and we feel strongly that the swift removal will reassure, will safeguard people, not only who live here, but who pass through the borough, who work here, who visit for whatever reason. I also want to use this opportunity to talk about access for disabled people, because there's an awful lot of exclusion. Disability is complex, but we believe strongly in the social model of disability, which is basically that, yes, people can have health conditions and certain impairments that affect their lives, but ultimately it's barriers that are disable them, societal barriers. So we would really want to be breaking down as many barriers as possible. I think that there's a lot more potential for events and council-led campaigns to somehow engender community cohesion. So we think that the council doesn't shout enough about the fact that it's a borough of sanctuary for welcoming refugees and asylum seekers. So as a starting place, we would love to have some kind of event or council-led campaign which highlights that really important status.
Thank you. Again, even in 2 minutes, an incredibly difficult question to fit everything in. There's lots you need to do. There's lots that can be done. There's also lots to learn. I think one of the principles that I hold fairly dear is that nothing about you without you, and that means that you need to have as wide wider view as possible as to the needs and views of a wider group of people. Now, we have a fantastic voluntary and community sector within Merton, and I know many of those groups are involved in much of the council's work and their work beyond it, doing fantastic things. We need to work with those people, we need to celebrate those people, and we need to learn from them. I think politicians particularly need to watch their rhetoric, the way they run campaigns and the way they talk about things, because that can be very divisive. And I will come back again. I think one of the biggest things that we can do is talk about control and participation. You know, democracy is about participation and the community. The council exists to provide services and support to the community. You know, we don't exist without you. And that means that you have to be able to understand how you can influence what we do. And if you don't think that you can influence what the council is doing, then something is wrong. And that does feed into populism, as I said before. I think one of the smaller ways, but hugely important ways, that cohesion can be built is that the council needs to look at access to its services, and particularly empathy in communication. I think too often, and I've experienced this as a councillor, but I know many of my residents that talk to me with their problems feel this too, that they're not always treated sometimes not with dignity, sometimes they are treated like they're being problematic, and they're certainly not treated with empathy all the time, and I think we need to look at that. Thank you.
I guess it can feel like a really, really scary world out there when we've seen the rise of Islamophobia, we've seen the rise of anti-Semitism, and of course that horrific attack just today. And I think all of our thoughts are with the two Jewish people involved in that are victims in that crime. But here in Merton, I think there is stuff that we can be hopeful towards. I've seen over the past 4 years as leader of the council, but also growing up in this borough, the strength of our community and the strength of our diversity. And I think early on when I became leader, it was about 3 months in, there was a horrific gas explosion right on the border in Mitcham. Hundreds of families were left displaced, and we needed to respond. We set up a rescue shelter in a community centre in Pollard's Hill. And what I saw from the community and what I saw from residents that wanted to help was why I love this borough so much. We had the Ahmadiyya Mosque come to provide curries for those families displaced and not allowed in their homes. We saw the Wimblecomm Foundation, the Don's Local Action Group, come along to that centre to provide sporting activities for those young children that didn't have anywhere to go. We had the Salvation Army there, we had the local church taking donations of clothes. That is Merton's strength, and that is the Merton that I know and that I love. And that is just one example, but over the 4 years there are countless examples. And I think it's absolutely right that we pay tribute to that voluntary sector. The council can't and rightly doesn't do everything, but the voluntary sector is immense in our borough. That is filling the gaps where people fall down, and they are part of the solution to building that stronger social cohesion, as well as our role as a council to convene and to support those organisations and faith groups.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for that. Okay, so I'm going to break the rules that I set at the beginning, but I am actually going to give you a 1 minute closer. I don't say vote for me because I think that's obvious. I think it's kind of what is the one message that you would like to leave with everybody here tonight. It's just a 1 minute because we're coming up to the last 10 minutes of the meeting. So just 1 minute, what is it that you really want people to take away? Because we've covered a huge amount of ground tonight. I think kind of we've covered transport, housing, development, climate, high street, business, community cohesion, standards in public life. We've covered a huge amount, but what is the one thing that you would like to leave with everybody here tonight? And I'm going to start with Dan.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Well, I shouldn't really repeat my opener, but my key message will be we're aiming for better services from the council. We want to lower the cost of the council because things like tax and fees are too expensive. And we want a council that is more responsive to people. So how do you access the council? It's normally through a very hard to navigate website. So we want to make a council that is easier to use, easier to interact with, is fairer on people, more empathetic, and actually works for you and not always seeks to try and find ways to get money out of you. So we also want a council that respects our heritage across the borough, not just here in Wimbledon, but all the areas of Merton. We also want a council that helps look after our young people and our elderly and everybody in between. And we believe in a fair Merton and a fair deal, in particular for Wimbledon.
Thank you. Okay, some final words.
Well, we've had a Labour-led council since 2010, and yes, there's some good stuff that's happened, but there's also a degree of complacency that has set in. So we would really want to shake that up. Labour have a slim majority, and the Greens, we're very sincere. We think we have a lot of good ideas. I hope I've convinced you tonight that we really are interested in engaging more residents in the democratic process. So I think what I would ask finally is for people to give us a chance to show what we can do to break through this time round and get the kind of collaboration that I was talking about earlier, rather than this tribalism, this loggerheads. Otherwise that persists without a bit of a mix-up.
Thank you, and thank you to all of you for coming and listening to us and asking your questions, which has been fantastic. As we said at the beginning, this election is about the kind of council administration that you want shaping Merton's future. And I think, you've heard tonight areas where we agree and areas where we disagree, and you've probably also gleaned something of our temperaments and our approaches as well. I think the Liberal Democrats are the only team with the detailed plan to make Merton fairer, more affordable and fit for the future. I'll be more than happy to talk to you about that. I've even got some manifesto documents in my bag if you want one. So please do come and ask about that. But whatever happens on the 7th of May, I love being a councillor, and if I'm elected, I'll continue to hold those in power to account and to stand up for every resident. And I think I can do that with honesty, persistence and care. But I hope that you'll give Merton the fresh start it deserves, and that you'll vote Liberal Democrats, and that together we'll build an open, competent and caring council that our community needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Merton is a special place, and I think over the past 4 years since I've become leader of the council, we've made some real progress, whether that's being in the top 8 for our action on climate change, whether that's starting to build the first council homes in a generation, whether that's supporting 10,000 residents with the council tax support scheme, investment in our high streets, in our parks, creating and establishing a new antisocial behaviour team that control our neighbourhoods, making pop-up tips in every neighbourhood 4 times a year, planting 1,000 street trees, more than doubling the number of cycle hangers. We are listening to residents, we are engaging with residents, and when you challenge us, we are acting. Where the system is broken, we are trying to fix it. And we've made some real progress, and I think, look at the manifestos, look at the promises. Ours is fully costed, none of the other parties is. We can tell you where the money is coming from. Don't risk change for the sake of change.
Thank you. And finally,
Thank you. Let me start with the council stuff and the team of people we intend to bring to Merton. The people and how they work together, and their cohesion and their governance and the integrity and all the things we've been speaking about, which you've very fairly raised tonight, are really important. So we very much value the ability to work with a whole bunch of different stakeholders. And if you look at one thing that struck me when I joined Reform UK, I just went to a few meetings, and you meet an incredibly diverse bunch of people who are very cohesive. So the range of skill sets that among our various candidates for the borough. I mentioned we've got business leaders, we've got people who all different parts of the military, we've got people who work in IT and digital, we've got health and well-being professionals, we've got lawyers and barristers, we've got people who work in finance and banks, we've got chief operating officers, we've got all kinds of different people who lead different businesses. And we think that we can work very successfully and very cohesively with all the various stakeholders, with the residents, so that we actually deliver some of these projects and deliver the savings that the council needs, so you don't have to have the council tax put up every year, but you can get a fair deal and success for the borough. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Well done, everybody. So thank you so much. As again, we've covered such a huge amount of ground, and actually I know that covering all of these policies in 1 minute is tough, but I think actually if you kind of reflect back, everybody's managed to share a huge amount of detail. So I think it's only fair that we thank all of the representatives here in the usual fashion. So we can give a big round of applause to Anthony Edgar and Diane Merton. Brilliant. I also wanted to say a special thank you to my colleague at the back, who's been fantastic at keeping time. So with her flags, brilliant. Bane of the line for our poor candidates this morning. I want to thank Wimblecomm for hosting, because these events take some organising and it's all done by volunteers, which is fantastic. And I think the most important thing is that people turn up, because, you know, in a democracy, we all have a voice, we all have a vote, and it's absolutely essential that we use it. So the most important thing is not just that the bar's open until 10 o'clock, but actually you must remember to vote on May the 7th, and really importantly, I've got a young kind of just first vote child. Please encourage young people to vote. They don't vote enough, they make a difference, and it's really important that we encourage everybody who's eligible to vote in every election to have their say. 282 candidates, 57 seats, 20 wards. It's a democratic festival. So I hope that everybody goes out and enjoys their vote, and thanks again for coming tonight.
Thank you. Say a big thank you to Louise as well for facilitating this evening. And to our host here at the Citizen Hub, who have provided this facility for us tonight. Thank you very much. And yes, enjoy the bar, and thank you all to you coming along.